È iniziata la seconda sessione.
The second session is now beginning.
Red button.
We're ready? Okay. Can I now start the next session? But first of all, it will be remiss of me not to thank our host, President Cosati, and of course of the Italian Senate, and the President Fico of the Italian Chamber of Deputies. I've got to say you have been so far the most generous of hosts. I've got a difficulty to explain to my wife why I put so much weight on with such good meals, but I'm sure I'll have to overcome it before I get back. But it is an important G20. It's important the effect, the rigorous, effective approach that we've shown to the COVID conditions, and it's the way that this House and that Italy has given a great example how you fight COVID. So I've got to say, I'm very impressed, and it's lovely to be able to be together with friends. And it is about friends that I want to open the next session, which is so important to us. And what I'd like to do is to begin to start with our next session. And I'd like to welcome back, bear with me. I'd like to welcome back for our second working session of the P20, Rebooting Economic Growth in terms of social and environmental sustainability. As I say, I want to begin by introducing the keynote speakers. The first speech will be from the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, the House of the People of the Indian Parliament. And our second keynote speaker will be Mr. ADESINA, the President of the African Development Bank, a world-renowned economist. He has previously served as Nigeria's Minister of Agriculture, first appointed President of the African Development Bank in 2015, and re-elected for the second term in 2020. And as I said to him earlier, the Bank of England awaits for the future. Finally, our colleague Mr. MASSA, the President of the Chamber of Deputies of Argentina, who could not attend in person to the summit, has sent a video-recorded message, and that will be that delivery of the keynote speech. Before opening the debate, please allow me to remind everyone of the debate rules. The requests to speak have already been collected, and as you know, we shall follow in alphabetical order of the countries in English. Member States shall take to the floor first, followed by the P20 guest countries. In order to allow everyone to speak, it's absolutely paramount to respect the 5-minute time limit for each intervention. Once the interventions are over, there will be a few minutes for possible replies by keynote speakers, and that can only be helped by people keeping to the timetable. So please, let's start, and let us make our first keynote speech from Lok Sabha. Mr. Speaker. No, thank you.
माननीय सभापति महोदय,
Honorable Chairperson and distinguished delegates, climate change and global warming are the biggest challenges before the humanity for building a sustainable world. We need to find a solution that ensures environment conservation and also addresses our needs for economic development. We have gathered here to deliberate upon this important issue. Friends, 2015 was a landmark year for mankind, as this was the year when Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, were considered necessary for the holistic development of the people and for building a better world. The collective resolve was to achieve them by 2030. Keeping in the view the COVID pandemic situation, it has become a challenge for us as to how we can achieve these goals within the given time frame. Climate change is adversely affecting the entire world. Lack of urgent action might have very serious consequences. Its direct impact is already visible on the lives and livelihoods of the people in developing countries. To protect humanity, we need to take concrete global action on global warming expeditiously. Indian Parliament has held extensive discussion on this critical issue, and following those deliberations, we have passed many legislations related to protection and conservation of the environment. India has made serious efforts to fulfill its international commitments to protect the environment. We have achieved the target of reducing the emission intensity of our GDP by 24% as compared to 2005, well before the time. Further, we are on track to reduce this intensity by 35%, much before the stipulated time, that is, year 2030. Similarly, we have been successful in reducing our CO2 emissions, CFC and HFC emissions, in line with our international obligations. We are not only fulfilling our commitments, but are also working proactively in the field of climate change. Our leading role in the International Solar Alliance of 98 countries and the CDRI of 25 countries reflects our commitment to the Earth's green future. Today, India ranks among the first 5 countries in the world in terms of renewable energy. The percentage of fossil fuels in the country's energy basket is gradually decreasing. Friends, in a post-COVID world, our country is taking action at several levels simultaneously to reboot economic growth. More than 65% of our country's population lives in villages. Hence, the government of our country has made concrete efforts to strengthen the rural economy. To ensure the availability of clean fuel in rural areas, free gas connection, LED bulbs have been provided under Ujjwala scheme and Ujala scheme, respectively. Along with this, solar pumps are being distributed to the farmers and renewable energy is being promoted through the use of biofuels. This will not only help in solving the problem of pollution in rural areas, but will also lead to regeneration of rural economy. Similarly, legislative interventions have been made to protect the rights of tribal communities and traditional forest dwellers, so as to secure their livelihood and ensure the conservation as well as further growth of forests. Our efforts have resulted in positive outcomes. During the last few years, not only has there been a significant rise in the forest cover in the country, but our biodiversity has also prospered. Today, India is one of the 17 mega biodiverse countries in the world. Similarly, work on smart city mission is underway, which will regenerate our cities, boost urban economy, and also control pollution. Our cities are increasingly using sustainable techniques like green energy and water harvesting, and use of electric vehicles is being encouraged. Our aim is to make clean and green energy accessible to all. India has featured in the top 10 major countries of the world in the Climate Change Performance Index. Our country has unequivocal commitment to ensuring climate justice. We also have a multifaceted role to help the world in dealing with climate change. On environmental issue, we are partnering with the global north on the one hand, and on the other, we are acting as an advocate of global south. Friends, only sustainable environment development can lead to sustainable social development. I'm very happy to inform you that the government of India has taken many initiatives for the economic and social empowerment of the vulnerable section of our society. Besides bringing a law to ensure food security and nutrition security, the One Nation, One Ration card system has also been implemented in our country, which provides for universal, unrestricted and guaranteed access to food grains to citizens across the country. There is a robust mechanism for constructive discussions and dialogue between the Parliament and the government, which has resulted in an enactment of legislations providing social security, income security, job security, and health security to the deprived and weaker sections of society. Lastly, I would like to say that Parliament is the focal point of all legislative, budgetary, and oversight functions of country. It represents the voice of the people. Hence, it is the responsibility climate protection and development can go hand in hand. The development policy of our country is based on giving equal importance to both economy and ecology. We believe that sustainable development is the foundation of self-reliant India, which is called Atmanirbhar Bharat, as we call it. Friends, in terms of population, every sixth citizen of the world are Indian. Therefore, if India progresses, the world succeeds. Today, we are working with a wider global vision to build a world order based on energy justice, climate justice, and economic justice. Our objective is to act as a bridge between the Global South and the Global North, to develop an integrated global action policy that would be the foundation of the world's future. Thank you so much, everybody.
The Speaker of the Lok Sabha, Speaker BIRLA, much appreciated, and your words are very important. Can I bring in our second keynote speaker, Mr. ADESINA, who is the President of the African Development Bank.
Sir Lindsay, the Speaker of the House of Commons of the United Kingdom, I'd like to thank you very much for your kind introduction and for your very strong support for me and also for the African Development Bank Group. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Your Excellencies, honorable speakers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you for inviting me to speak here today at this very important event on rebooting economic growth, social and environmental sustainability. I congratulate Italy on its G20 presidency. I am greatly honored to speak to you in these hallowed chambers, the Senate of Italy, the Palazzo Madama, the chambers of justice, fairness, and equity, the parliamentary speakers of the G20. And I'd like to thank all of you for your support for the African Development Bank Group. Your Excellencies, the Parliament is a house of justice, a place where citizens are heard. Allow me today to air the voice of Africa. I therefore rise, Mr. and Madam Speakers, to raise my voice on behalf of Africa for its 1.3 billion people whose voices need to be heard. Africa is suffering from three areas of injustice: vaccine injustice, climate change injustice, energy transition injustice. On vaccine injustice, of the 600 million COVID-19 doses to be delivered by COVAX, only 71 million have been delivered and 48 million administered. Developed countries bought up most of the vaccines. Indeed, 20% of the world's population bought up over 80% of the vaccines in the world. Vaccine nationalism further blocked access. Global supply chains maxed out their capacities. So today, just 2% of Africa's population have been fully vaccinated, compared to 54% of adult population in the United States of America and 75% in Europe. On climate change injustice, Africa contributes less than 4% of the greenhouse gas emissions globally, but suffers disproportionately from its consequences, with increasing droughts and floods, destroying already low infrastructure levels, and causing $7 to $15 billion in annual losses, which could rise to $50 billion a year by 2040. Yet, Africa receives only a meager 3% of global climate financing. On energy transition injustice, the discussion now is about Africa getting out of gas. Africa is being treated just like developed countries, where the energy sector is the main source of 80% of the emissions. In Africa, it is the opposite. Emissions come from lack of energy, as a majority of our people depend on heavy fuel oil and fuel wood and kerosene as energy sources. While the rest of the world is transitioning from energy sources that give them 100% energy supplies, Africa is at ground zero and just developing its energy sources. While Africa, of course, will maximally use its renewable energy sources, there are limits. We must ensure access, affordability, and security or stability of energy. If Africa uses all its gas for electricity, it will have contributed just 0.67% to global emission. Africa should not be penalized. To deny Africa the use of gas, which is far more environmentally less polluting than charcoal, kerosene, and heavy fuel oil, is to kill African economies and its industrialization. Africa cannot be poor in an environmentally sustainable manner. Developed countries should meet their promise of $100 billion a year to developing countries to help them address climate change. So let fairness run in the corridors of decision makers and justice from the ashes of inequality. From vaccine access to greater financing to support climate adaptation and the use of gas combined with renewable energy sources, let justice reign. Africa is not waiting to be helped. The African Development Bank is doing its part to support the rebooting of Africa's economic growth and to reduce some of these inequalities. The bank launched a $10 billion crisis response facility to provide financing to countries to address rising fiscal challenges at the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The bank also launched a $3 billion Fight COVID-19 social bond on the global capital markets, the largest ever US dollar-denominated social bond in world history. Africa should not and must not outsource the health security of its 1.3 billion people to the benevolence of the world. Africa should not have to beg for vaccines. Africa should be manufacturing vaccines. The African Development Bank will provide $3 billion in financing to support Africa's pharmaceutical industries to ensure that the continent produces at least 70% of its medicines, up from currently 30%. We will also support the manufacturing of vaccines in Africa while building pharmaceutical and biomedical scientific capacities to produce vaccines for COVID-19 and future pandemics. The African Development Bank Group is taking bold actions to tackle climate change. We have been at the forefront on renewable energy. Think of the following, Your Excellencies. The African Development Bank and other development partners financed the 800 megawatts Middle Solar Project and the 510 megawatts New Wazazata, the world's largest concentrated solar facility. This will help Morocco to achieve its goal of 52% renewable energy mix by 2030. The bank is currently implementing a new bold initiative called Desert to Power to develop 10,000 megawatts of solar power in the Sahel region of Africa, which will provide electricity to 250 million people. It will be the largest solar zone in the world. In addition, the bank is supporting United Nations efforts on the Great Green Wall, an environmental defense shield against desertification in the Sahel and the Sahara. The bank has committed to invest $6.5 billion in this program to boost the climate lungs of Africa. The bank is leading on climate adaptation financing for Africa. Last year, the African Development Bank invested 63% of its climate finance in adaptation, making us the first multilateral development bank globally to achieve and surpass the 50-50 parity for climate mitigation and adaptation called for by the United Nations. In his opening address at the United Nations General Assembly last month, Secretary General Antonio Guterres recognized the African Development Bank as an example for other development partners by allocating at least half of its climate finance to adaptation. The Bank and the Global Center on Adaptation have launched the African Adaptation Acceleration Program, otherwise called AAAP, to mobilize $25 billion for climate adaptation for Africa. Your Excellencies, the Bank's work on agriculture has already benefited 71 million people in the past 5 years, including millions with access to drought-tolerant crops to build resilience, food and nutritional security. Your Excellencies, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area presents a huge opportunity for economic growth, but its success will depend on massive investments in infrastructure. Over the past 2 decades, the African Development Bank has provided over $40 billion in support of infrastructure on the continent. This places the bank far ahead of any other global or regional financing institution. To ensure inclusive growth, the African Development Bank is focusing on women and youth. The bank's Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa, which we call AFAWA, is helping to leverage $3 billion for women-owned businesses in Africa. Our Jobs for Youth program in Africa has the goal of creating 25 million jobs and improving the skills of 50 million youth. The future of Africa's youth does not lie in Europe or anywhere else, but in a prosperous Africa, delivering quality and inclusive growth for its large youthful population. Your Excellencies, with regard to debt, Africa needs your support. I wish to commend the G20 for its leadership on the Debt Service Suspension Initiative, as well as the G20 Common Framework to address private and commercial debt of the continent, which now accounts for 40% of external debt. The decision of the IMF to issue $650 billion in special drawing rights, SDRs, will go a long way towards macroeconomic stabilization while boosting balance of payment reserves. However, the $33 billion issued to Africa is too small and falls way below the minimum of $100 billion called for by African heads of state. I would therefore like to urge G20 countries to fully commit to the proposal that has been spearheaded by France and the United States to reallocate an additional $100 billion of SDRs to developing countries. Madam Speaker, it's very good to see you here. This is why it is important that part of the $650 billion special drawing rights issued by the International Monetary Fund should also be allocated to multilateral development banks, such as the African Development Bank, specifically for Africa. The African Development Bank can leverage these SDRs 3 to 4 times and provide much-needed financing for development finance institutions all across Africa. These will complement the macroeconomic stabilization drive of the International Monetary Fund with its Poverty and Growth Trust and its Resilience and Sustainability Trust. It will unleash the complementary power of the global financial architecture, the IMF and the multilateral development banks. It will also allow the African Development Fund, which supports low-income and fragile states, to have additional concessional resources as we look toward a more robust 16 replenishment of the fund next year. Your Excellencies, honorable speakers of parliaments for people, planet, and prosperity, let us ensure that we judge rightly, rule rightly, and ensure fairness for all in all your deliberations. As Martin Luther King said, and I quote, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice." End of quote. Let there be equity, fairness, and justice for all. Let the voices of the less powerful be amplified. Honorable Mr. and Madam Speakers, I know that you will rule justly and fairly for the people, planet, and prosperity. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Can I first of all say thank you for that most welcome contributions in addressing the issue. to be addressed on behalf of the African Development Bank. Can I just say, they really do have a true champion and somebody who speaks honestly and openly and reminds us of the needs of Africa as well. Can I now go to President MASSA from Argentina, who sent us his message by video, and I think we're about to go now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, allow me to congratulate the Italian Parliament for the excellent organization of this very important event. I also want to express my appreciation to the moderator of this panel, Sir Lindsay HOYLE, Speaker of the House of Commons of the United Kingdom. And I wish to recognize the other speakers, David Sassoli, President of the European Parliament, Mr. Umbir, the Speaker of the House of the People of India, and Mr. Akinwumi ADESINA, President of the African Development Bank. Let me take this opportunity also to greet each and every colleague accompanying us throughout this event. Before I touch upon the subject of our discussion, let me mention two things. The first refers to the P20, the Parliament's G20, which happened in 2018 for the first time in Argentina, my country, in the city of Buenos Aires. And we're very pleased to see that the P20 is continuing because it allows every parliament, every house of democracy to represent our plurality and to express our voices represented here at the P20 and in the G20. It's also a way of supporting the idea that we should continue working together with all of you to support parliamentary diplomacy. I am sure that when you deal with economic and political issues between governments and between executive powers, the possibility of having an open and transparent dialogue, an honest dialogue between parliaments, allows us to continue to support and strive for the strengthening of relations between our nations. And therefore, I am very grateful for this opportunity today to exchange experiences. It's an excellent opportunity to be able to work together and to learn from one another's successes and mistakes. We are experiencing the recovery from a huge global crisis. The pandemic has shed light on the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities of our economic system, of our food system, and of our healthcare system. It has clearly shown the need for all of our countries to commit to the creation of an economy that is socially and environmentally sustainable, as highlighted by this forum. I think we have to be very clear in dealing with a theme which is extremely important for the low and middle income countries. Those of us who are creditors from the point of view of the environment and debtors from the point of view of finance. The multilateral credit organizations expressed by the leadership of the IMF and the World Bank must understand that the programs that had been drafted in a world which is extremely different in the pre-pandemic era have to now take into account the new reality we live in. Countries that aren't seeing any development in terms of employment, in terms of their finance, in terms of the accumulation of their monetary reserves, and in terms of the trade balance with other countries. To deal with the current situation, we need to make sure that For those countries that have been able to find an environmental balance, but who have financial debts, require a form of engineering from our multilateral organization so that we can deal with these countries, giving them enough time, and in terms of learning to accept this new reality we live in. For Argentina, the multilateral organizations and the international fora have to make sure that the deadlines, the rates, and the structures with which the new financial packages are designed have to take into account that countries like Argentina, who are environmentally sound, although financially in debt, have to be dealt with in a new way. We have to be able to accept the responsibility that we can generate protein through our animal breeding that can become something environmentally sustainable. We accept the responsibility, but we have to make sure that lower rates, longer deadlines, and the possibility to have access to capital to promote productive development is essential so that employment and social sustainability can bring about the development of countries such as ours. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Can I thank President Massa for that, so very informative once again, and has made a contribution. Can I just remind everybody, we're now going to the speakers who have got 5 minutes, and to help you, because I know you wouldn't want to run over, but if I give you a reminder at 4 minutes, that's the time to start winding up. I think it will help with the timetable if we work to help each other. So let us go to the Speaker of the Chamber of Deputies from Brazil, Mr. Lear.
Mr. Moderator, fellow parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, the theme selected for this session fits well into the moment in which this summit takes place. As vaccinations advance worldwide, we need to resume thinking about the future, economic recovery, and the fulfillment of our environmental commitments. In Brazil's view, such objectives are of key importance. As a developing country, we need to grow, to lift people out of poverty and offer decent life opportunities to all our citizens. At the same time, we are mindful of the role that any country, including our own, has to play in the effort to counter global climate changes. Brazil is second to none in realizing these two objectives. We Brazilians are known as having one of the major emerging economies in the world, while being home to some of the most amazing natural landscapes on Earth. We wish those to remain our prime qualities. Brazilian entrepreneurs are aware that intensifying climate change would only damage our national prosperity. Extreme meteorological events such as droughts or frosts destroy the wealth generated by agriculture, one of the main vocations of Brazilian economy. And this is why society is more and more convinced that urgent action against climate emergency is required. Such conviction has already borne fruit in the House. I have the great honor to chair. Despite the immediate demands posed by the response to the pandemic, the Chamber of Deputies has not overlooked during the past 2 years the conditions required for Brazilian economic recovery to be in tune with the fulfillment of the objectives of the Paris Agreement and Agenda 2030. Last January, the National Policy on Payments for Environmental Services was established. It stimulates individual and collective actions aimed at preserving ecosystem. Furthermore, as far as forests are specifically concerned, a topic of great interest internationally, the Chamber of Deputies is discussing a new law based on work carried out by a committee that over the past year has been dealing with the national strategy on fighting forest fires. The Chamber has been trying to improve the energy matrix of Brazil. It is being considered with the expectation of approval during this year, the preparation of a bill on carbon offset in Brazil. In addition, the Chamber has already voted a bill now under review in the Senate to regulate and stimulate small power stations with clean and sustainable sources of energy. All the laws and bills I have referred to above have the merit of recognizing, as does the motto of this summit, that the commitment to the planet has to be a commitment to the people. The environmental goals that the world proposes itself to carry out can only be achieved if they're implemented with a focus on people, supporting their adaptation to the new economy, generating green jobs, and opening new opportunities for all, and particularly for developing countries. The Brazilian members of parliament will spare no effort in modernizing national legislation with a view to aligning the country to the most ambitious objectives in terms of environmental sustainability. Brazil wishes to support the international community and be supported by it in the construction of a better future. The pandemic has shown that global changes can only be overcome if there is cooperation among all, leaving no one behind.
Great example of doing it within 5 minutes. Thank you for that. Let us go over to China and let us go to the Environmental Protection and Resources Conservation Committee of the National Party of the Congress. We are now video linked. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues. Good morning and good afternoon and good evening. I want to first congratulate Italy on successfully organizing this important meeting, and I'm greatly honored to take part in this discussion. I was greatly encouraged and inspired by the remarks of previous speakers. We know that President Xi Jinping at this year's and last year's general debate of the UN General Assembly mentioned China's ambitions for the carbon peak and carbon neutrality targets, and also China's plan to stop building new coal-fired power projects abroad. He also identified the blueprints for China's cross-sectoral efforts to address climate change. And the National People's Congress of China is also working on legislations to create the legal framework for China's carbon peak and carbon neutrality targets. You know, very soon, that COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity will be held in Kunming City of China. And through this conference, we will make China's contribution to the global efforts. And here on today's topic, I want to talk from the perspective of the new growth logic and on how to realize a more inclusive, more equitable, more resilient, and sustainable recovery under the new development paradigm. Well, over the past 7 decades, the world has achieved great progress. Emerging economies like China have enjoyed remarkable and rapid growth. Globally, world population increased by 3 times, average life expectancy continued to grow, per capita output increased by 4 times, and total output grew 12 times. But such growth was mainly achieved through traditional means, especially massive investment, expanded use of traditional resources and energy, and cheap labor. Consumption of fossil fuels played a major role. At the same time, we must recognize that more than 900 billion of the global population still has no access to electricity. Nearly 3 billion people have not been able to use clean energy to cook. Like Mr. ADESINA mentioned, per capita carbon dioxide emission on the African continent is less than 2 tons, while for developed countries it is generally around 7 tons. We're confronted with global warming, COVID-19, and a shortage of resource supply, and facing the twin tasks of attaining the climate goals in the Paris Agreement and promoting global recovery. It's not sustainable anymore to reboot growth via old paradigms. So we need to explore new growth models for a sustainable recovery. Late last century, World Bank once put forth a new theory on measuring the wealth of nations, which said we should not only focus on the traditional human capital and produced capital, but also invest in natural capital and social capital. And now intellectual capital is included as a new category. This new theory stressed the importance of raising the accumulation and sustainability of all types of capital, monetary indicators apart from output and income, such as education, health, environment, and distribution of wealth, and understanding the SDGs and human development from the standpoint of increasing inclusiveness and fairness. But this gives us useful guidance as we pursue a sustainable recovery on new pathway to growth. In light of this, I wish to offer you the following recommendations. First, we need to invest in all types of capital, including natural capital, to achieve a green, low-carbon, and sustainable recovery. Where so far the global recovery is mainly through traditional ways. This may be useful in short term, but in the middle to long term, it is not sustainable. So we need to explore new ways to increase green investment, which can directly propel sustainable recovery. We may apply public policies that enable the growth of natural capital, social capital, and intellectual capital, and utilize market mechanisms and green finance to make investment and financing greener. We also mentioned the carbon pricing. This is also an issue we should attend to. We also need to encourage green innovation to foster investment models that are in line with the carbon neutrality targets, and to help the world achieve climate goals and the SDGs. Where for China, we plan to invest about 45 trillion RMB yuan.
5 minutes has now gone.
That's 7 trillion RMB yuan in the next 5 years on renewables and greening of the industry, green consumption, green urbanization, and innovative infrastructure in order to bolster our country's efforts for green and sustainable recovery. Of course, this investment should be diversified. We cannot only rely on government funding. We must also mobilize private sector to invest. Second, we need to advance systematic reforms to achieve a just and green transition. We're given the multiple targets for future development. We must take comprehensive and systematic actions in order to make the post-pandemic recovery sustainable. To realize a just transition, we must to mainstream green and low-carbon concepts in our plans for social and economic recovery. We need to align recovery in the short term with medium to long-term goals for sustainable development to make this process comprehensive. We need to introduce laws, regulations, standards.
You're well past the 5 minutes, and it's unfair to other speakers. Right, can I say thank you to China? We now go to the Deputy Speaker of the French National Assembly. Can we go to Ms. St. Paul?
Mesdames et messieurs les
Ladies and gentlemen, speakers and presidents of parliament, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. No one with the political duties can refrain from dealing with the constraints posed by climate change. We have to be able to act in a tangible way and in an effective way. I'd like to mention the economic and social dimension and the agreement we took on carbon on borders. This is the agreement that will come into effect beginning the next January 1st. By limiting the presence of carbon emissions, we will be creating short-term constraints that will have an impact on our enterprises, although with long-term benefits in mind. This is to the advantage of all of us, of course. It is a matter of our very survival. And we will be able to agree on any possible mirror clauses, which will have to be a priority, especially when it comes to the agricultural sector, and therefore imposing upon agricultural imports these same clauses, these same conditions, which will have to be applied to all European trade agreements. This is an essential condition as a way of ensuring fair competition between European agriculture and imported products. It wouldn't be acceptable for the green pact that reduces farmed surface become a tool to diminish biodiversity and increase the carbon footprint, since we would be importing products that would no longer be allowed on the European territory. And therefore, the introduction of such clauses in trade negotiations is important from the economic and social standpoint towards European businesses, especially the European agricultural sector. This is also a condition we very much need as a way of bringing about a true ecological transformation, both of production and consumption, since we no longer have the burden stemming from unfair competition. We have to be able to offer an answer to those farmers or agricultural entrepreneurs who agree to produce in a more virtuous way, although this will make their products more expensive compared to foreign products. Carbon tax on borders and mirror clauses will lead to a global virtuous cycle. This will be essential to preserve all economic and social aspects together with the ecological ones. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I say thank you to the Deputy Speaker? Now we come to the President of Indonesia, which I've welcomed President Mahathir. Speaker Mahathir.
Distinguished Chair and delegates, the COVID-19 pandemic is today's biggest global challenge and has created a multidimensional crisis. However, the crisis gives the momentum for us to build a better world in the post-pandemic era, to maintain environmental sustainability and to create an inclusive future. The crisis has shown the interdependence between people, prosperity, and planet. Today, the world is also at a tipping point of the climate crisis. The UNFCCC report shows that current countries' commitment under Paris Agreement will contribute to an increase of 16% emission rate and the temperature increase of 2.7 degrees Celsius at the end of the century. This reality is far from the Paris Agreement target of limiting temperature increase below 1.5 to 2 degrees by the end of the century. Let me share my view. First, G20 needs to lead by example in the effort to realize green development, renewable energies, and climate change action. G20 represents 85% of the world economy. Our collective action will certainly bring big impact and can lead the transformation toward green economy. For Indonesia, we are on the track of reducing our emission rate of 29% with our own efforts and are ready to reach up to 41% reduction with international support. Indonesia aims to achieve net zero emission target by 2060 and forest and other land use net sink by 2030. We have also set the target to reach 20% supply of renewable energy in 2025. Second, it is important to forge international cooperation in supporting developing countries. Financing, technical support, and technology transfer are needed by developing countries to transform their economies toward low-carbon development. We need political will and leadership for all countries, including for the Parliament, to step up the ambition and adaptation action as well as energy transition. However, this is no one-size-fits-all policy, and energy transition needs to be carried out gradually. Third, social aspects should be promoted alongside with economic and environmental dimension. Green economic growth must also be inclusive. It should advance equity, narrows down inequality in the society, and engages all stakeholders. The development of green industries and renewable energy will create green jobs. We need to enhance the awareness of our people of environmental sustainability. The local communities must be at the heart of the environmental protection effort. They should be involved from planning, execution, and to evaluation phase. Indonesia has implemented social forestry program that helps community to improve their living standard through forest utilization activities. Green economy transformation requires our shared commitment of all countries. The world already accumulated abundance of knowledge, science, technology, and various resources. What we lack of is trust and the commitment to work together and to help one another.
1 minute left.
The P20 should be able to help synergizing and combining the potential of various countries to face global challenges and create a shared future. I believe that through our cooperation in P20, we can help realizing a stronger and more sustainable global economic recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Maharani. We now go to Speaker Park of Korea.
Thank you, Chair. Dear fellow colleagues, in an effort to advance the common goal of a sustainable world, the Republic of Korea has taken bold steps toward a 2050 carbon-neutral society through its Green New Deal. For the initiative, the government plans to invest more than $65 billion by 2025. The focus on this policy is primarily placed on encouraging the private sector's participation and providing support for innovation efforts. Concrete outcomes have already begun to emerge. Along the West Coast, local residents, governments, and businesses have come together to create the world's largest offshore wind farm that can generate 8.2 gigawatts of electricity. Local residents participating in this project will have shares and receive a specified portion of the profits. This can be referred to as a resident-inclusive green development. On the East Coast, the city of Ulsan, the international capital of Korea, is building a floating offshore wind farm that can generate 6 gigawatts and facility to produce green hydrogen. In other areas, we are also witnessing the voluntary participation of many individual businesses. In the transportation sector, over 1.2 million vehicles will be converted to electric and hydrogen vehicles by 2030. Financial institutions are also joining in this effort with carbon neutrality climate finance. Korea's National Pension Service, one of the world's 3 largest pension funds, has already declared a coal-free initiative. Korea's state-run banks will expand financial support for green sectors by doubling their current share of total financing to 13% by 2030. The government intends to establish a Korean-style green taxonomy for the smooth operation of green financing. Along with the government measures, the Korean National Assembly took active and preemptive initiatives. In 2012, we adopted the Act on Allocation and the Trading of Greenhouse Gas Emissions Permits to introduce Asia's first nationwide emissions trading scheme. In January 2020, we passed the world's first hydrogen-related laws, taking note of hydrogen's potential as a green energy source. Now the country is fostering technological innovations to bolster the hydrogen ecosystem. In September last year, we adopted a resolution urging the government to raise its 2030 NDC further. Korea's enhanced 2030 NDC target will be presented at COP26. And this August, the Korean National Assembly passed the Framework Act on Carbon Neutrality and Green Growth. These laws provided the government with policy tools and the institutional mechanisms for the 2030 NDC target increase and the 2050 carbon neutrality objective. Fellow speakers, it is critical that we take these actions together. Global partnership is a must, not an option. In this May, Korea hosted the Partnering for Green Growth and Global Goals 2030, or P40 Summit, to bring about solidarity and inclusiveness in the international community. Korea will serve as a bridge between advanced and developing countries. We are ready to share our know-how and support developing countries through the Global Green Growth Institute and the Green Climate Fund.
5 minutes.
I seek to request your active cooperation to ensure that these projects are properly financed as promised and implemented as planned. Thank you.
We're now going over to Speaker Sentop of Turkey. Speaker Sentop.
Değerli meclis başkanları,
esteemed speakers of the parliament, esteemed participants, in the assessments we made during the first session, we have stated that humanity has been facing one of the greatest challenges throughout the world. The pandemic has deeply affected and continues to affect not only our economic structures, but also every aspect of our lives. We observe that the negative effects of the pandemic also lead to radical changes in our societies. The social and environmental effects of the pandemic are among these negative consequences. The fact that the coronavirus pandemic deepens the problems that already exist in these areas inevitably necessitates all humanity to take common, fast and determined steps. Although we witnessed the beginning of a recovery trend in the world economy, we clearly see that this recovery has not yet caught up with the pre-pandemic period in many respects. Moreover, many respected institutions, especially the OECD, draw attention to the fact that the time are still needed to close the gap that has opened. We also learned by experience how important it is to shape the recovery process in a coordinated manner and to include preparation for future shocks. Valuable friends, within the concept of the sustainable development, the President, His Excellency, underlined at the 76th General Assembly of the United Nations, Turkey, which doesn't remain indifferent to any global problem, crisis, or call, will also do its part in the issues of climate change and environmental protection. As you know, Turkey is one of the first countries to sign the Paris Climate Agreement. However, we hadn't yet put this agreement into effect due to the unfairness of the obligations. Because we believe that those obligations should not prevent the developing countries to develop any further. So in the line with the constructive steps taken and within the framework of our national contribution statement, we assessed this agreement again and we ratified the Paris Climate Agreement in our assembly yesterday. I'm very pleased to share this news with you during G20 Parliamentary Speakers Summit. Esteemed speakers of the Parliament, in order to make a world livable place, we should make it livable for everyone. Pandemic process indeed makes everyone feel that reality very strongly. We have openly observed that the disease of one individual somewhere around the world means that another individual somewhere far away from him can get infected with the same disease. In the same manner, if there is not peace in another country and if the minimum living standards are lacking, then we are not at peace in our homes. If we do not try to understand with sincerity and empathy, if we do not see other people and states as the sons and daughters of Adam and Eve just like us, but approaching them as a point from where we can gain interests for ourselves, then we will only deceive ourselves. After the pandemic, as we are, it is seen that the political relations will be shaped again. It means that the relations between the state and the nature and the state and the people and the interstate relations should be reshaped with a discourse in a healthy manner. If we are not putting the people into the focus of our approaches, then the solutions will not be sustainable. Esteemed members of the press, with this understanding in mind, Turkey has taken part in multilateral platforms. And at the same time, as of 2017, Turkey has become the country which provided the highest number of support. After 2017, Turkey has become the country with the highest number of humanitarian support. Since the beginning of the pandemic, our country has fulfilled its responsibility and with the slogan of great Islamic philosopher Mevlana, there is hope after despair and there are many suns after darkness. And we have extended a helping hand to 160 countries and 12 international organizations. I hope that this understanding we adopted will bring benefits to all humanity for a healthy environment, and I greet you all with respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker Sento. We now go to the Speaker of the House of Lords. Now, John, I'm going to keep my eye on
you. Surrounded by counterparts from around the world discussing matters of common concern and building working relationships. And there is no substitute for gathering together in person. The impact of COVID-19 pandemic has been catastrophic, and it's right that our minds should now turn to recovery. It is worth acknowledging, however, that the impact of the 2008 global financial crisis is still being felt globally. The impact of that crisis will only have compounded the difficult situation for some. As Lord Hague of Richmond, William Hague, the former UK Foreign Secretary and leader of the Conservative Party, has said, those who are well adapted for such a crisis like COVID-19 will never have had it so good. But for the rest, the truth is that pre-existing inequality will be made worse. But perversely, a crisis always presents an opportunity. Indeed, Winston Churchill is reported to have said, "Never let a good crisis go to waste." We should seize the moment and rethink the way we order and behave as economic actors. In the UK post-2008, this meant a root and branch reform of the financial sector itself. In 2013, the Parliamentary Commission on Banking Standards, on which I served, recommended a range of bold measures, including tighter banking regulation, underlining the role of individual responsibility and the responsibility of banks themselves when taking risks, and reforming the way the market worked and clarifying the important responsibilities of governments and legislators. As legislators, we have a responsibility to shape the laws and the regulation which govern the lives of the citizens we serve. This means being bold and forward-thinking, not simply reactive. In Westminster, the House of Lords has established a select committee to consider the long-term implications of the COVID-19 pandemic on the economic and social well-being of the United Kingdom. And I am pleased to say that they have already reported on the opportunities presented by a more digital world and made recommendations to the UK Government concerning the worrying trend of the most disadvantaged and marginalised people in society being further marginalised and disadvantaged by the rapid online revolution. To develop the point further, I would like to draw on the comments of Mariana Mazzucato, Professor in Economics of Innovation and Public Value at the University College London, who incidentally enjoys Italian citizenship. She has argued, and I quote, "It is not enough for governments to simply intervene as a spender of last resort when markets fail or crises occur. They should actively shape markets so that they deliver the kind of long-term outcomes that benefit everyone." It's for others in the political arena to decide how this is to be done, but I agree that this is the moment which we should look at once again at rewriting the rules of the game, and I suggest that we should be bold in doing so. I would also like to draw on the thoughts of another individual who's urged policymakers to reconsider how global economics work, Pope Francis. A year ago, almost to the day, he laid out his vision for a post-COVID world by uniting the core elements of his social teachings into an encyclical aimed at inspiring a revived sense of the human family. Fratelli Tutti was released on the feast day of his namesake, St. Francis of Assisi. He said the pandemic had confirmed his belief that the current political and economic institutions must be reformed to address the legitimate needs of the people most harmed by the coronavirus. I agree. Global problems demand global solutions, and because of that, we should feel compelled to work together. With such comments in mind, it is imperative that social and environmental sustainability have to feature in the modern economic policy. Colleagues, it's time for urgent and collective action, and that is now.
Thank you, Lord Speaker. We now go to President Luquibo of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. President Luquibo.
Dear colleagues, members of Parliament, I wish to thank all the parliamentary and governmental authorities of Italy for inviting our delegation. On this opportunity, I welcome the initiative of the P20. We are the representatives of people, and we have a power, a great power, that can help us act and make our respective governments act. What can we do to relaunch economic development in terms of social and environmental sustainability after the coronavirus pandemic? What we wish to retain of this pandemic, the lesson to be drawn, as the representative of the OECD said, is that we need a new humanity. The planet is just but one family, one body. When a member is sick, the entire body is sick. As the president of the African Development Bank, Mr. ADESINA, reminded us, imagine a country such as the Democratic Republic of Congo that 153 million hectares of forest has only 0.1% of carbon credits. So all of Africa only benefits from 3% of carbon credits. And if you want to feed, you have to feed the entire body, not the left foot, but not the right. And so we need to join forces. The disasters of a climate nature are of many different nature, but the most threatening one right now is desertification of a major portion of Africa. Suffice it to look at the southern part of Africa threatened by the Kalahari Desert, or the northern part by the Sahara. And these two deserts are threatening Central Africa as well, which is the very lung of Africa and the world. And the Democratic Republic of Congo has established a fund against the risk of desertification and soil degradation. And we invite everyone to contribute to this struggle conducted by the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And this is the right time here at the P20, which has 75% of the world trade and has the economic clout to help. It's better to prevent than heal. I shall end with the vaccine. Vaccines should be the right of all and not only a national good, but a world good.
Thank you, President Lukwibo. We now go to the Speaker of the Senate of the Netherlands, Speaker Bruden. Speaker.
Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, it is a very great honor to be here today. It is a great privilege for the Dutch Parliament and for me personally to participate in this meeting. We are grateful to the Italian presidency of the G20 for the invitation to our country. More specifically, I would like to thank my colleagues from the Italian Parliament, Mrs. Alberti Casellati and Mr. Fico, as well as the President of the Interparliamentary Union, Mr. Pacheco, to allow us to join here today. Grazie mille. I believe that our meeting today is even more valuable since the COVID-19 pandemic prevented us from meeting each other in interparliamentary conferences for a long time. It is a great pleasure to be able to meet you again here today. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, I would like to contribute some thoughts to our important discussions on this topic, rebooting economic growth in terms of social and environmental sustainability. The title of this session combines three key elements of our societies: the economic element, the environmental element, and the social element, or as the Italian G20 presidency puts it forward, the three Ps: prosperity, planet, and people. As representatives of the people, Parliament should keep in mind that these three elements are crucial for successful, sustainable, and prosperous societies. A well-functioning economy to provide jobs and welfare to the people. A healthy and well-preserved environment for people to live in. And a fair and free social structure that provides equal rights, justice, freedom, and democracy. Needless to say that these three elements should strengthen each other instead of affect each other in a negative way. That is why I am happy with the priorities of the Italian G20 presidency, the three Ps, and its efforts to regard these three elements as interconnected pillars. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, allow me to shortly turn back to our discussions 2 years ago during the P20 summit that took place in Tokyo, Japan. We spoke about our future societies, how digitalization, robotization, and big data will change the way we work, the way we interact, and the way we live, economically, environmentally, and socially. Societies where artificial intelligence makes our life more comfortable, where innovations in the medical field make us more healthy, where technology increases our standard of living and provides us with the possibility to organize our economies in an environmentally friendly way. Speaking today about rebooting economic growth and about environmental and social sustainability, I would like to stress that innovation and technology will play a very important role in this. Technological innovation helps us to solve many challenges we face in our societies on the economic, social, and environmental levels. But on the other hand, it is wise to realize that innovation at the same time appears to be a challenge in itself. A challenge for our societies and for our democracies. Algorithms, artificial intelligence, and big data provide great opportunities, but also serious risks and some important questions for parliamentarians on the fields of accountability and control.
1 minute left.
As parliamentarians, we should invest in our knowledge to be prepared for the society of the future, to be prepared to have the knowledge, the facilities, and the ability to oversee the consequences of technological innovation, scrutinize our governments, and to also become the parliaments of the future. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, thank you for your attention. It is a great privilege to be here today, and I look forward to the rest of our discussions. Thank you.
We now go to the Speaker of the Spanish Senate, Speaker Garcia.
Thank you very much, President Fico, distinguished colleagues. I'd like to offer a point of view which I feel is complementary, very humbly, and I'm referring to the issue of depopulation. I believe that the demographic challenge is a new struggle for equality in many of our countries. It is also a test for our democracies, and I think we have to deal with it with determination and boldness. Nothing less can be acceptable. In this context, I wish to mention the small municipalities and the rural areas of our countries. They have been some of the main victims of the old and failed austerity policies, despite the fact that they have a very important role to play in the reconstruction and recovery following the pandemic. And they'll be able to have this role if the EU and the countries which are a part of the G20 act firmly and with ambition to counter depopulation and to reduce the inequality gaps. In Spain, the population is growing in the major cities, whereas in rural areas and in small and in regions marked by small cities, there has been an unprecedented decline in population. In the last decade alone, there has been a decline equal to 250,000 inhabitants. And in order to deal with depopulation, we have to deal with the economic issues which lead to it, because the distance between territories isn't only measured in kilometers. It's also measured in terms of policies and resources. It is measured in terms of solidarity and cooperation. It can also be measured in terms of recognition and visibility. That's why we have to be ambitious in reducing the distance between our centers and our peripheries, between the urban world and the rural one, because the increase in inequalities following the pandemic is no longer a risk, it is a reality. Despite this diagnostic, I think that the sustainable transformation of our economy is possible. That's why the post-pandemic recovery has to be one marked by reforms. It needs to be fair, because only a fair recovery will be a sustainable one too. From this point of view, the creation of Next Generation Europe has been a very different kind of a response to try to come out of the crisis. I think we can now search for new ways for growth that can offer social and territorial cohesion. A good example of this is the plan of measures to deal with the demographic challenge that we have started in Spain, with an investment equal to 10 billion euros, which is 10% of our recovery plan, as a way of countering depopulation and creating more social and territorial cohesion. This reconstruction will obviously not only be limited to the areas of the country that face depopulation, but also the ones that have been historically subject to injustice. We have seen that there is a close link between the health of the world and the health of our human population. Therefore, we have to be respectful of environmental sustainability. Climate has to be considered to be a public global asset. That's why I have to underscore the fact that it is in the rural world that we can truly and best understand how important biodiversity is. We have to support together an ecological transition. We have to promote the digitization of the rural world, support sustainable tourism, learning. We have to reduce the gender gap, focus on the cohesion of our territories, especially the ones which are subject to depopulation. Together, the governments of the G20, including the ones of the EU, together with the European and national institutions, such as the ones which are represented here by our parliaments, all of us will be responsible through our decisions for the support of millions of citizens who face depopulation and inequality, allowing them to become the main players in the reconstruction of our countries and of their own future. Thank you very much indeed.
Can I thank Speaker Garcia? We now come to the Russian Federation with Deputy Speaker Kosachev.
Honorable speakers, dear colleagues, for more than 30 years, the concept of sustainable development, which embodies the trinity of economic, environmental, and social objectives, has remained the fundamental model of the world development. In 2020, the Russian Federation presented its first voluntary national survey on the progress made by our country in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The document focuses on extensive social programs. The national projects, labor productivity and employment support, small and medium-sized businesses, support for individual entrepreneurship are focused on providing citizens with decent work and achieving sustained economic growth in the country. The doctrine of food security of the Russian Federation aims at providing the population with safe, high-quality and affordable agricultural products, raw materials and food. Russia is constantly working to reduce inequality. This task is being solved within the framework of the national project Demography by providing financial support to families at the birth of children. The national program Digital Economy of the Russian Federation, Eliminating Digital Inequality, the national strategy for action for women, ensuring equal rights and equal opportunities for men and women. the national decade of childhood, ensuring the well-being of families with children. During the coronavirus pandemic, in order to ensure the financial stability of families with children, as well as to save jobs, parliamentarians adopted about 300 anti-crisis legislative acts. Families with 28 million children were supported. Payments were established to medical and social workers who participated in the fight against the pandemic. In total, almost 600,000 specialists were covered by payments, more than 500,000 medical and almost 73,000 social workers. Millions of people have been able to keep their jobs through business support, including tax breaks, reduced insurance premiums, and other measures. A healthy population is one of the main priorities for our country. The healthcare project is aimed at creating a sanitary shield, so to say, a health system that is resilient to new challenges. The reality of globalization is such that these measures will be more effective when correlated with similar measures of neighboring states. Issues of overcoming distrust of vaccination, artificial barriers for international registration of vaccines, combined use of vaccines, and creating a system of post-COVID rehabilitation require a comprehensive discussion. The challenge of global climate change has enriched the 2030 agenda with new benchmarks. This means switching to clean energy sources and reducing the carbon footprint of all production processes. Russia fully takes into account environmental priorities, and the United Nations approved SDGs when developing its medium and long-term economic strategies. Over the past year, our country has prepared and is preparing for approval dozens of documents aimed at environmental reorientation of the Russian economy. Among them are the goals and main directions of sustainable, including green, development of the Russian Federation, the federal law on limiting greenhouse gas emissions, and the strategy for long-term socio-economic development with low greenhouse gas emissions until 2050. Russia opposes the politicization and acceleration of the green agenda. We believe that support for global efforts to protect the environment should not be at the expense of the development of states that are not ready for a sharp transition to green rails, especially in the context of an acute economic crisis caused by the coronavirus pandemic and requiring significant investment. Thank you very much.
Can I thank everybody for those contributions? I'm now going to go back to replies from our keynote speakers. Speaker BIRLA, would you like to start? No? Any comments from our two keynote speakers? If not, please, Mr. ADESINA.
Yeah, thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. I want to thank all the honourable speakers for all that you said. I think the key, I just want to comment on three things. First is the divide between the rural and the urban area. I think that one is very, very critical because most of those that will suffer the consequences of climate change in our world today are those in the rural areas, and they are least able to actually support that. So I think that's very, very important for us to do. The second is that we need to also support greater digitalization, and I really like those points that were made because we need to make sure that we have a lot more financial inclusion. Because if you have financial inclusion, people have more resources to also be able to adapt to the changes that we see all around us. And finally is the issue of how we help developing countries, in particular, to deal with exogenous climatic shocks. We have something at the African Development Bank that is called it's a facility anyway, to help countries to insure themselves against exogenous climatic shocks. It's very, very important to be able to pay for premiums for that. So the least developed countries, the small island states, don't have the resources to adapt. And that facility for us is about $250 million. We need to be able to use that facility to support countries so they can get payouts of maybe about $1 billion is going to be very, very important for them. And finally is the role that you all play as honorable speakers in terms of legislations. I think for me, I feel very encouraged today, honorable speaker, that I'm here to see the leaders of our parliament actually giving voice to the issue of climate, the issue of inclusion, and the issue of social participation in the process. So I want to really thank you very much. All I want to do is just to thank you for really inviting me to be here, and thank you for your leadership as we build a world that is more prosperous and a world that we can live a better future for all of our children and grandchildren. Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker.
Can I first of all thank our keynote speakers, but thank all speakers and colleagues for this interesting and useful session on promotion of sustainable development in both social and environmental terms. This now wraps up the first day of our summit. But don't dash off. End of the session, staff are going to take us for the family photo. Let's get the family together. We're going to go through those doors, so please, let's make our way for the photo.